In this video, we are going to start working on our database component. The first thing we need to do is to write a test. Under the test directory, let's create a new one called unit for our unit test. And then another one called database, where all our database associated tests will be stored. And the first test we are going to write is going to be called database manager test, and it will test the make method on the database manager. Database manager will act as a factory basically to return the correct instance of the database depending on what we have within our env file, how we set the connection, whether it's going to be MySQL or SQLite. Database manager will take care of basically returning the correct one. So database manager, the test that we are going to write is basically going to check whether it returns the database instance. So we are going to call our test, if I just do public function returns underscore database instance, and we need to add the dog block here, test. This tells PHP unit that this method is actually a test, and it should be executed and obviously tested using whatever method we're going to use within. And the method we are going to use is going to be this assert instance of. But as you can see, my ID is highlighting this because we haven't actually extended the test case, which then extends this PHP unit framework test case. So what we need to do is extend and then test case. There we go. That's what we need to do. And now that should work fine. Obviously, this method takes 2 or 3 arguments. The first one is what we expect to be returned. So it's going to be database : class. And then the next one is what is going to return this specific instance in our case here, which is going to be the database manager class and method make. And then the third argument, which is optional, is the message that we want to display if this test fails. So it's easier for us to identify basically which test exactly failed. And I'm going to put in double quotes database manager : make did not return instance of database. And that's it. So if we now go to our terminal, so this is our first test. If we go to terminal and call PHP unit from the root of our project, you'll see that obviously this fails. It tells us there is an error, database manager not found. We don't see this message which we've just typed here because that's not actually, it doesn't even get there. It's actually telling us it's an error because we are basically calling something that does not exist at all. So it didn't even get to this third argument. Okay, so what we need to do first is obviously create this database manager. Let's go back to our editor, and under the app directory, let's create the new directory called database. And inside of this directory, we're going to create a new class called database manager, and the namespace for this class will be app / then database, and that's it. Okay, if we click on OK now, let's just close all this. We don't need all this created. And inside of this database manager, we need the make method. So public, and it's going to be a static function. Because we're calling this, as you may remember, if we just go back one, you can see we are calling this make method statically with these 2 colons. And the name of the method is obviously make, and it will take 2 optional arguments. First one will be a driver, by default null, and the second one will be of an array type, which will be called options. And it's going to be an empty array by default. So if we now save it, go back to the terminal, run PHP unit again, as you can see, it still tells us that it cannot find database manager because we didn't actually imported here. So what we are going to do is use the use statement, and then we go for app, database, and database manager. There we go. So now it should find this class. So if we go back to our terminal, clear the screen, Command K, PHP unit, and there we go. So now, as you can see, the error has changed. We have database manager test returns database instance, PHP framework exception argument 1, no value of PHP framework asset. Assert instance of must be class or interface name. And obviously this is the error, because we're getting this error because obviously the database class does not exist either. So what we're going to do next is create the database class here inside of our database directory. So database, and the namespace is correctly fetched already, so that's what we need. Let's just close this and remove that. We have database class now. This one will be an abstract class, so let's quickly prepend abstract, because we won't be instantiating this database class on its own. It will have the extensions like SQLite and MySQL. So before this one, let's just import it as well. So app, database, and database. There we go. If we now go back and try it in the terminal, if we clear Command K, and now we run PHP unit, there we go. Now you can see that the message has changed. Now it tells us that it failed asserting that null is an instance of class database. Now our message, as you can see, is now displayed here. So whatever we put as a third argument here, as you can see, database manager make did not return instance of database is now displayed. So the problem now is the fact that our database manager doesn't return instance of database. That's basically why it's failing. So if we go back to our database manager, we obviously cannot just return new instance of database because it's an abstract class. So what we need to do is to create drivers. Basically, I'm going to call it drivers, but it's basically the extensions for this database class. It's going to be the SQLite or MySQL. So inside of the database directory, under our app directory, let's create a new one called driver, or you can call it really whatever you like, but I'm just going to call it driver. Okay, inside of this driver, I'm going to create a new class, PHP class called MySQL. SQL, there we go, and it's going to be under the namespace app, database, and then it's going to be driver. So that's one of them. And if I just clear all this again, and then another one will be SQLite. So SQLite. And the same namespace, it's all good. Okay, both of which will extend database, the abstract database class. So if I go back to MySQL, do the same here, extend database. There we go. So what I need to do now is simply return, let's say, a new SQLite, and that should make the test pass. So if we go back to the terminal, clear the screen, PHP unit, and there we go. We've got one test and one assertion. As you can see, this colors setting that we've added already is highlighting this in green, telling us everything is okay. So we got this test, which we've written inside of the database manager test, is now passing. But obviously that's not quite what we need. So we're going to have to dig a little bit deeper. But for now, this database manager test returns what we asked for. So it returns the instance of the database class. This test passes, and we can now move to the next video.